So this year I've been on one, at least minimum call a month with a manufacturer discussing the fact that they got caught with specs that weren't what they said. And
the Know Your Gear podcast.
I have a Fender Blackmore Strat. Oh, okay. Yeah. With a 7.25-inch radius that the frets on the high, that frets out on the high E string. It's been leveled and crowned, check relief, also shimmed. Is this how 7.25s are? Seems like a bad choice. It's not how they are. And obviously the Blackmore Strat's a good quality instrument, so it shouldn't be doing that. So it's just on your high E string. And when you say frets out, I'm wondering if you mean when you bend it. Is that, let's just discuss this easily, right? So on the high E string, if you're just playing it up and down, like chromatically up and down, and you're getting dead notes or issues, then it sounds to me something is out of whack. Either the frets are not leveled correctly, or you have a serious hump, or the neck is bowed. Something is off with the neck. It's not straight enough, or the frets are not leveled enough, and probably both. If the issue of your dead, because you said, what did you say? Level and crown checked. Just frets out. When you say frets out, if it frets out because you're bending it, this is real common. And the reason this happens is because the bridge tends to be radius to the fretboard. The 7.25-inch radius is going to be very rounded. So the fret saddles tend to be very rounded as well. And so when you bend up on your high E string, you're essentially going uphill. In other words, you're hitting the fret because it's at an angle. Think of it like a boat getting beached, right? The high E string is a boat and it's just coming up on the beach. How you would fix that is you would raise the action on the high E, maybe, and if it's happening on your low E string, low E, you would dare too. That is one way you can do it. Another way, I'm really scared to tell you this because you said it's been leveled. When I level a 7.25-inch radius fretboard frets, what I would tell you if you brought it to me to do is I would give you an option right then. I'd say, look, we have two ways we can do this. I can level the frets in radius of the fretboard. In other words, I'm basically going to do a fret file, and I'm going to go up and down the frets until they're all perfectly leveled with each other, and the fret file will essentially ride the top of the frets, and they will be curved just like the fretboard is. The other option is I could use a radius block, and I might radius the frets at like 10-inch radius or even a 9.5, but probably 10, so you know. And what that means is even though the fretboard is radiused, the frets are flatter and so by doing that, I'm going to be taking more material off the center of the frets than I would off the sides. This is a very small amount, okay, that we're talking about. So don't think like your fret's really thin in the center and really thick on the sides. It's not how much material it's going to take, but it would be a little bit. Of course, it gets a little scary if you have vintage fret wire and your 7.25-inch radius, because then, there's just not a lot of material to do that. The reason I would do that is because when you do the bend, the frets would be flatter. What I've said in the past, and I'll say it again now, which is you can make a 7.25-inch radius fretboard play amazing, okay? Absolutely. But the reason why so many $200 guitars, it's why, look at how many times recently this year on the geeky stuff videos, how many times did a manufacturer, a quality manufacturer, mind you, overseas claim that a fretboard was 12-inch radius or 9.5, and I said it was 12 or 14. It was flatter than they said. It happens over and over again. That is not a coincidence. There's no coincidences in these videos that I'm making. Okay, the fact that almost all the manufacturers ship with the guitars with 2mm action off the 12th fret. That's not a coincidence. Okay, no, they didn't all come together and have a meeting. They all just know what gets returned, what causes issues, and they're learning to pass a certain level of quality to keep the guitar in our hands and not come back to them. The other thing that they do is they can flatten the radius of the fretboard and the frets even flatter. And the reason is because, again, a flatter, it's not that it's hard. Well, I guess it is. It's easier to make a guitar play well that is a flatter radius fretboard. It's just easier because of the fact that you don't have to deal with the fact that when you're doing bends, you're essentially going uphill. I wish I had a better analogy in that. I could pull out the dry erase board if you guys could tolerate it. but the important part is, actually, you know what? I'm going to do that. I know you guys hate my drawings, but I got to do it. So we're going to go 7¼ inch radius fretboard. It's going to look like that. The problem, though, is if we put the strings, let's say we put these two strings right here in the center. Hey, look, it's like somebody's nose and they're frowning. This is how it looks, right? Okay, so the strings are flat. So in other words, if we were to measure across the strings, let's say the strings are 12-inch radius because they're flatter. The fretboard, though, is 7¼ okay? What happens, though, if a guitar tech goes, oh, I'm going to make your strings radius because your saddles, right? Like that. The problem is when you bend this string, when you get about here, you run aground. You see what I'm saying? I hope that's a good illustration. Okay, if not, I apologize. I'm not an artist. I don't have a huge budget with graphics and a producer. But this is what we have. So my point is your guitar can be fixed if that's the problem. My concern, though, is because you've already had your frets leveled. I mean, every time you level your frets, you're changing the fret material. Whether, if they're jumbos, they're now mediums. If they're mediums, they're now vintage wire. So I'd be a little cautious of that. But that is why, like I said, you can see why anybody who's trying to save money manufacturing a guitar for you just wants to make things flatter because, again, they can get you better consistency out the gate. And this reasoning for me to do this, I don't know if you guys know this reasoning, not only to do the deep dives the way I do them, but then create the fact sheets, these scorecards. It's not only to build the compare and contrast. In other words, you can look across the industries and see how all the guitars made. The manufacturers have picked up on this. There's a reason why I've been on a dozen is not even a little exaggerative. I've been on a dozen, so one a month. So this year I've been on one, at least minimum call a month with a manufacturer discussing the fact that they got caught with specs that weren't what they said. And when I say that, I want you to understand the manufacturer, I should say the brand calls me because they go and check their numbers and they go, hey, we looked. And I go, huh? You're right. I'm like, I know I'm right. I'm using tools. It's not like it's not that hard. Here's the tool. And this is what the tool says. The problem I don't know, what I can't see is, was it that one anomaly? One guitar did that. They go back and check and they go, no, the manufacturer who built these for us did this. And they and I have had these discussions, and it's because even though it's not to spec, it's a better consistency of quality. And the manufacturer, instead of, I guess, being upfront and honest and saying, look, what you're asking for is a little bit more difficult and the price point you want to hit, they're just changing the specs a little bit. A thing that's funny is, and I'm just going to leave it on this. We're going to leave on this note. This is something I just disclosed to the patrons last week, and so I'm going to disclose it to you because it came up. If you watch my videos now, in every video when I say this is what the specification is, and if it's different than what the manufacturers say, notice how there's a screenshot of the manufacturer's website. It's because I've been caught at least twice. When I say caught, I mean caught off guard, where I told you, hey, here's what it is. It's really this. The manufacturer goes in and just changes their website to what I said. And then people start putting in the comments, Phil, you're wrong. You said it's 12 and it was supposed to be, 10, but their website says it's 12. I'm like, well, now it does. They changed it. So now I screenshot them so that when they change it, I can go, hey, look, it's, in fact, one manufacturer, we had to use the Wayback Machine and prove it to them. We're like, you guys changed this. Your person at your company changed it after the video. And now, because they wanted me to change my video. They're like, you need to change your specifications. It's not right. I go, no, they're right. That's why you changed them. You want to see the proof why you changed it? So back to your 7¼ problem. That's why 7¼ is tricky to do. I highly recommend, I have a 7¼ inch radius guitar that I have a review of. It'll be out this month. I know I've been pushing it back for other videos, but trust me. And I will say this, as many times as I've told you guys, I think a quality guitar tech can do as good as a plug machine and vice versa. I have to say, if you can if you want a 7¼ inch radius fretboard, fretted guitar, and you have the opportunity to do a plec, I am a true believer that the plec and the 7¼ inch radius fretboard really do like each other. What I mean by the Plek really does make that experience a lot better. So if you like this clip and you'd like to watch another one, you can click right here. And if you want to see the entire episode of the podcast, you can click right there. As always, thank you for your time and know your gear.